What makes the greats great? What makes the successful successful? What makes the brilliant brilliant? Our Tuesday meetups with the celebrities of pharma industry and science are your one-stop shop to all these answers and more. Join us for Pies of Life, an initiative of the Biopatrika Industry Mentorship Program, where we bring your dream mentors to you.
Okay, so I think the introduction is that as folks learn their drug development processes in academia, intellectual property, I think, at least in my opinion, is sort of the weakest link. People don't really know or study intellectual property as much, or are taught intellectual property to think about intellectual property systematically. And so when I sort of play the game that I play with drug development, and I ask people like, how much would you licensing a molecule for? I think that's always like a deer in headlights kind of question, right? I don't know, like I don't even know where to start, how much to ask for. But the value of the asset lies in the patent. So I thought it'll be good for you to come and talk to us about what it takes to patent as they are doing basic research and how the industry sees it. So yeah. So Chong, nice shirt, Chong, today. Very nice.
Thank you. I'm sorry I'm a bit late.
Yeah, no worries. You can quickly introduce yourself and then we'll ask Joanna to speak about her experiences.
Yeah. This is Chong. I'm currently a postdoc working in the biostatistics department at UPenn. Before that, I obtained a PhD in biostatistics at UNC Chapel Hill.
And
very nice. I used to. I have a sister who lives in the Raleigh area, and I spent a summer at UNC doing research, and that was the summer when I realized that I did not want to go into research.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we just get started. So Joanna, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background, like how you got into IP, and any from a career perspective, and then we'll maybe open it up for discussion later on.
Sure. So I guess how did I get into IP? It was a series of wrong moves, I guess, and that's how I ended up first in law school and then becoming a patent attorney. No, so my background is actually in microbiology and immunology. I always wanted to be a doctor of infectious diseases, which is kind of ironic given what's happening, in today's world. But I really wanted to work with Ebola and some of the worst viruses out there. That was my passion. That's why I wanted to study microbiology and immunology. I did a year at the University of Cologne in Germany, and I was actually a medical student there studying, virology. Then I came back to the US, and I don't know what happened. I always said, I have a family of lawyers. My brother is a lawyer, his wife's a lawyer. And I always said I was never going to be a lawyer. But something happened, and all of a sudden I ended up in law school. So kind of, I decided I don't want to go to medical school. It's too many years. I don't want to do a PhD. That's even more years. And I ended up in law school. When I was in law school, I wanted to become a healthcare attorney. The woman who, before I went to law school, I also did my master's in public health. There I studied epidemiology because, again, it's going to help me become a doctor of infectious diseases before I decided not to become one. Then I went to law school. I wanted to study healthcare law. The head of the department for my master's of public health program happened to be a lawyer, and I really liked working with her. I liked seeing the fact that as a lawyer, you get to work with the healthcare industry, you get to work with doctors, you kind of work with hospital systems, everything. So I was going to be a healthcare attorney in law school. My summer internship with Greenberg Traurig, which is one of the biggest law firms in the country, if not the world, even at that time when I started in Boston. Even though it was a smaller group, they had a healthcare department until about a month before I joined them. So a month before I joined them, their entire healthcare department left to either become general counsels of hospitals in the Massachusetts area. Someone went off to become the Attorney General for Massachusetts. So basically there was no healthcare group for me to join. So they put me in the patent group because, again, I have a background with science, and to be a patent attorney, you have to have a degree in science. So I was stuck in the patent group. And I realized quite quickly that I understood patent law. I thought it was intriguing. I thought it was fun. And the attorneys that I worked with told me that I have a job security as a patent attorney, because no matter what happens, if the economy crashes, people have to still, or companies have to patent their assets. If without patents, their assets are essentially meaningless. So that was a good thing, and was a very good thing, because I started practicing in 2008, right before the economy crashed. And I saw lawyers left and right being let go. I mean, every day it was another news story about 100 attorneys being let go from this firm, 100 from that firm. Us patent attorneys somehow managed to, survive all that, which was kind of cool. But on top of all of that, there's also just a lot of changes in patent law that constantly happen. With the Supreme Court issuing new decisions, I mean, even starting with like the Myriad or Mayo decisions back in like 2012, 2013, where they completely undid Section 101 of patent law, which is kind of a fundamental core of US patent law. Every year there's a couple of new decisions out there that constantly make you as an attorney have a job, because now you have to go back to your clients and tell them that, hey, we need to redo this. We need to think about it this way. We need to think about it that way. So there's always a lot of excitement happening in the field of patent law, believe it or not. And then, kind of in addition to my working, I started teaching. First, I started teaching at Harvard. I taught at the Harvard School of Public Health because I have the healthcare background. And a topic that I taught in that class, and I continue teaching it now at Cornell, is on compulsory licensing, and kind of this whole big topic of like IP waivers that we're seeing in the media these days because of the COVID vaccines. So everything that's happening now with pandemic, and the need to give people access to drugs versus also protecting innovations, stuff that has been kind of, I won't say the focus of my work over the past decade, but it's certainly been a part of my work over the past decade, at least from the teaching side. And now I get to see it kind of play out in the real world with companies developing these vaccines, and then there's being a push to see if we can waive those rights to the vaccine, and kind of just seeing where everything goes from there. So, from the time my career started till even right now, it's just been a very interesting learning experience. Everything's constantly changing, and you constantly have to kind of go with the flow. And, a part of my job is working with biotech and pharma companies, and I get to see all of the new and cool innovations that these companies are working on. Stuff that's not going to be in the market for at least another 15, even more years. And we get to kind of work with it from day one, which is always pretty fascinating.
Yeah, cool. Hi, Mandana. I think I don't know how to phrase this, but I guess in a way the analogy for me is as scientists you get interested in economics when you make your own money. Similarly, patent law becomes interesting when your stakes, when you have some stakes in it, like when you have a patent or you're working on something on a patent, then patent law becomes really interesting. Although not that otherwise it's not important, but I think the stakes become really interesting. So let's open it up for Q&A and see how it flows. And then I'll ask you some specific questions of some case studies that I know you and I have talked about in the past.
Sure.
But let's open it up some question and answers. Maybe we can go to Mandana. You can introduce yourself.
Oh, I thought, Naren, you're going to say, Mandana, you'd probably have a question to ask, so you can you can go ahead.
You always
Hi,
do.
Joanna.
Hi, nice to meet you.
I actually do have a question. Nice to meet you too. I'm so sorry to be joining this meeting just now. I finished up in the lab. My husband just picked me up and playing fetch with the dog, and so I'm connecting through my phone. So I am a postdoc at Penn Medicine. I did all my undergraduate, postgraduate work back in New Zealand, University of Auckland. And I am at Center for Neurodegenerative Disease Research. And the work I'm getting started to do based on what I previously done here at Penn, my time here at Penn, was leading me to this preclinical work of evaluating the efficacy of a compound that's already in clinical trials for oncology indications in an ALS model. So yesterday I actually got the email from the Biotech that's got this drug in clinical trials phase 2, and it's looking very promising. They're based in Norway. So we had a meeting with them about 6 months ago talking about this project, that we've done these informatics, and we've got these candidates, and the one of most interest with a good literature behind it is the one that, you know, they've got the compound for to inhibit it, and whether they would be willing to supply us with the compound. And, you know, I learned that it's difficult situation for biotech and pharma, especially because when they've got something in clinical trials, they don't want to be giving it out for other purposes in case, you know, something goes wrong or whatnot. But they agreed, and so they sent the MTA and things like that. So I'm really excited that my project's in sort of drug development stage right now, because that's something that I've always wanted to get to. And I'm so, you know, it's going to be a whole new learning experience for me. Of course, I did the regulatory course with Narendra as our tutor, and that was so helpful. Narendra, I don't know if I told you this, but that kind of like really shaped how to see and design this preclinical project I'm doing in terms of the PK, PD studies, and kind of what to look out for if it was to go forward to the next stage and the next stage from like the regulatory point of view. So all these courses honestly add up. You don't know when they're going to come handy in terms of actually shaping your science.
All right, Madonna, I'm going to ask you to ask Joanna some questions here.
Okay. So all I was going to ask is, you know, I don't know the legal aspects of things, because I'm now sending this NTA to Penn Innovation. But what typically the restrictions, if you like, or ownership of the data when a compound is supplied by a biotech to an academic research group that's very removed from what they've been doing for more of a, you know, very early stage like preclinical work?
Yeah, so great question. So you probably should have mentioned also that I handle a lot of transactional work for biotech and institutions. So where we do a lot of different agreements, whether they're research agreements or clinical trial agreements and stuff. So your question is one that I deal with almost on a daily basis. Who owns the IP? You know, that's a big question. So one way I always tell people to think about IP ownership is start from the beginning. Without companies involved, the first owner of IP is the inventor. And an inventor is someone who creates the subject matter of the claims. So have you guys seen what a patent looks like and kind of know, you know, what how they're structured? And, you know, at the end of the patent, you have the patent claims. So if you look at the claims, if you created something in those patent claims, so say you're a method of treating cancer using drug X. If you came up with drug X, you're automatically going to be an inventor because you're in the claims. If you came up with the idea of using drug X specifically for cancer, again, you're right there. If you come up with something completely different, like an assay for measuring something that's part of that whole process, you may not be in the claims, so you're not going to be an inventor. But so let's just start with whoever creates something in those claims is an inventor. Now, when you get into kind of working with a company and working with an institution, if you work for either, you're probably going to sign an employment agreement that's going to require you to assign anything that you developed while working for that company or institution over to them. So if you're working for the biotech and the biotech tells you to develop this drug, you develop this drug, you have to sign it over to the biotech. So even though you're an inventor, you're not the owner. The owner is going to be that biotech. Now you bring in two parties together and they have some sort of a research collaboration situation going on. The biotech supplies the drug. The biotech most likely has patent claims covering the drug, modifications to the drug, using the drug for certain indications. But let's say now the biotech wants to work with a university to see if this drug works for other indications. And that's where the expertise of that institution may come in play. So if you have those two parties kind of working together, all of a sudden you're going to have the employees from the institution developing something, contributing to new claims potentially, these claims of, you know, a different indication. So then you get into a situation where you're going to have inventors from both parties kind of contributing to the claims. And if inventors from both parties are in the claims, then both employers have to be joint owners of that IP. And that's usually how it's handled. Sometimes it's if a company is doing a clinical trial, for instance, and the institution is just following the protocol, doing nothing kind of groundbreaking by themselves. They're just reading instructions and following it. They're probably not going to be listed in any claims. They didn't do anything groundbreaking. They're just this pair of hands to carry out experiments. In that case, you're really not going to have any joint ownership. You're not going to have any contribution from the institution. That's all the biotech. Sometimes when you're doing like an investigator initiated study where the impetus for a certain project is coming from a university and they just want the drug from the company because they want to test it, you know, for their purposes, then usually the ownership and most of the data is going to belong to the university in that regard, because they're kind of bringing that intellectual know-how, that idea for this new project. So it all comes down to, you know, who came up with the idea, and that's determined by the patent claims. And then once you have established who the inventors are, like the physical people, then you can start tracing the companies that may own that IP.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. That was definitely very informative. So I guess this is now going to be with Pen's Innovation Office, and they're legal, and they'll negotiate the terms, I suppose, of the contract. So it sounds like the last scenario you explained is more relevant to the circumstances I'm in, where you know, the study is what we've come up with, and we're saying that, okay, we've got a candidate that could be a good target to modulate, and okay, wow, there's already a company that's got this compound that, you know, targets this candidate for oncology indication, but we want to try it for, you know, in ALS. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
thank you
absolutely. I think that's what it sounds like.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other question?
Yeah. So yeah. Okay. I'm just checking if I was on mute or not. Yeah. So currently, at the moment, when so with the COVID situation, and there are many companies out there that are trying to develop vaccines. Their approach would be to make a protein molecules like a spike protein, right? That a lot of other companies would also target, right? So for them to develop a drug and to patent it, would it mostly be the formulation that gets patented, or because the protein itself would be the same kind of target that all the other companies would also most of them would at least try to approach it that way, that our vaccine would be what's it called, the spike protein, so that the immune system can recognize it. So what for those companies get patented? Is it a formulation or?
Oh, everything can get patented, especially in biotech. So no, you kind of start first with the composition. That's usually kind of the basis of any patenting. With small molecule drugs, for instance, it's usually the chemical composition that you're patenting. And then you can patent a method of making it, but making those compositions is fairly simple. You patent any sort of like method of using it to treat people, method of treating, cancer, ALS, kind of, you name it. So you get to patent quite a bit. In biotech, it gets even more interesting because there's even more to patent. So let's start with an antibody, for instance. So you patent the antibody, which is your composition patent. And that's kind of, the composition patents are usually the stronger of the patents because, once you get into like a method of making it, somebody can try to make it a different way and get around your patent, especially in the small molecule space. But with biotech, it gets harder because you can't just have a different methodology for making a lot of these compounds. Any slight changes, even, great example, like the Moderna or the Pfizer vaccines. I think the New York Times published an article that listed like the 19 steps of how to make this vaccine. A deviation from any one of those steps can yield a completely different end product, which you don't want. But that's pretty common in a lot of different biotech technology or biotech compounds. So the method of making these compounds is also equally important. And so companies will patent that. They'll patent the purification process. They will patent also the cell line oftentimes. Pretty much anything, any kind of step in that whole line of making it can be patented. And then you also get into your method of treatment. You get into your dosage amounts. How much are you going to dose patients? You can get into, pretty much anything you can think of can be patented. Those are probably some of the more common ones. But if you look at Humira, which is arguably the biggest blockbuster drug out there, it's protected by like 120 patents or something like that. And it's just variations of all of these patents. They're all restated a little bit differently to give you a little different scope of protection. And they're also done that way so that if somebody wants to try to get through your patents and try to create their own version of the drug, they have to litigate even more patents. And they have to try to break through those additional barriers to getting on the market. So there's a lot of different things you can patent, and you can patent them in different ways just to build up that portfolio.
So maybe Jade and Chong, maybe I'll ask a question this time and then you can ask one. So, 120 patents, a lot of patents. Approximately, what is the cost of a patent? Like, let's say you're not working for an organization.
Mm-hmm.
Jade, we can ask that question. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. Or am I answering, or is Jade answering?
Yeah. No. I thought Jade was smiling. So, what is the cost of a patent, and like yearly fees, and how long do I have? Like, what is the total cost?
Yeah, so it varies, obviously. It varies because of attorney time. If you get a big firm billing at $800-900 an hour, obviously time, it gets very, very expensive. In the US, I think the estimate for a patent is around like $50,000 or $60,000 to get one US patent. A lot of these you file internationally as well. And, depending on basically what the company is willing to spend, you can file in 10 countries, you can file in 20 countries. I have a client that is filing in about 19 countries total. So whenever it comes to just filing the patent application in those countries and doing the required translations and paying the country fees, it's close to $100,000 just to file those patents in all of those countries. Then you have to prosecute those patents. And then you have to, once you get those patents issued, you have to pay maintenance fees on those patents in order to keep them alive. So there's constantly some sort of fees. It's not cheap by any means, but a company like AbbVie, which owns Humira, for them, it's worked out because they got all these patents. They did spend a lot of money getting those patents, but now they have this really, really long life of the patents. I think the original Humira drugs expired, or they were set to expire in 2016. They got extended through the normal process at the patent office to 2018. But because of all of those other patents that they have, their patent protection lasts through at least 2034. So that's another, 16 years of patent protection, whereas the normal life of a patent is 20 years. So they've definitely, all the money that they invested behind the patents, they're definitely getting a lot of money back because it keeps their drug on the market without competition.
Yeah, and they're making $10 to $12 billion a year, if not more. Yeah,
exactly, probably more. And it's all in the US because their European patents have already expired. They expired in October of 2018. So it's really just the American patents that are protecting this.
Yeah, Jane or Joe?
Yeah, I have some I'm not trying to patent anything. I have a career choice question because law school is actually something I'm thinking about going back to right now at an advanced age as a postdoc. I know it sounds like that your career trajectory is not like direct focused on the law area. So I was just thinking, I guess my first question would be, what did you bring into law school with your multiple backgrounds? And my second question would be, LinkedIn weird formula sometimes would suggest me to apply for patent agent. So my second question would be, what's the difference between a patent attorney and patent agent?
Yeah, so I guess to answer your first question, most students going to law school probably have, a political science background, an English background, something kind of history, something general. It's very rare to be have a science background in law school. You're one of only a handful of people in your entire class who has that background. And then that background allows you to become a patent attorney and, do all this fun stuff in the patent world. So, so I actually think you would be well suited to go to law school because you already would position yourself really well. And all of those other students who are competing for jobs at law firms, people with a science background, especially a PhD, which I do not have, but if you have a PhD, you pretty much can go to any law firm, especially like a patent boutique that takes PhDs for the patent practice. So I think from a career standpoint, if you want to go to law school and become a patent attorney, I think you'll be just fine. The next question is do you really need to go to law school or can you just be a patent agent? So being a patent agent, you can do exactly the same thing as a patent attorney. You would sit before the patent bar. So you don't have to be a lawyer to sit before the patent bar, but you'll be registered to practice before the patent office. You get to do the same kind of stuff we do. You get to write those patent applications. You get to prosecute them. And from that perspective, you get to do the same. You can't do more of the legal stuff like reviewing contracts or negotiating license agreements, that kind of stuff. You won't be able to do, but you would be more of like a tech specialist. And as a patent agent, you can also work in law firms because they have a lot of tech specialists and just patent agents working for them as well. So for the most part, you'd be able to do exactly the same thing, except for some of the transactional work, which requires you to be a licensed attorney.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Just in regards to what you just explained, what would be a route to receive some training in order to be, sort of qualified as a patent agent? Like, can you do internships or courses?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So a lot of, first there's a lot of law firms. When I lived back in Boston, a lot of the big firms, Wolf Greenfield is one of them, and I know there are other ones, that they actually brought in PhDs who wanted the training. and they would train the PhDs to become patent attorneys, and then they would pay for you to sit for the patent bar as well. And so you kind of get the training through them, and then you have a job through them as well. So that's one way of doing it. There's online courses that you can take to study for the patent bar. It's really not that complicated. It's a one-day online exam, and it's basically just reading the rule books for the patent laws, the MPEP, and just kind of knowing that, and you get to access those books while you take the exam as well. So there's numerous ways of studying for it, but I think probably the more interesting one is getting a job at a law firm that will actually pay for you to get this training, and also they'll give you a job for it.
I second that. I actually applied for life science patent agent in Arnold and Porter in DC.
Yeah.
Didn't get it, obviously, so I won't be here. But yeah, so Madonna, to answer your question, they did promise in their job description that they will pay for your law school and they will help you to become a patent lawyer. And I think that's an interesting perspective.
They said they would pay for law school?
Some will pay for law school, some will just pay for you to become a patent agent. I think it depends. I know in Boston they have Suffolk Law School, which has a night school, and people can go part-time. So that one, if for attorneys or for people who wanted to go to law school, they would have that option to go to night school for a couple of years and then become attorneys. So I think every firm is different with what they offer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. This is about patent for statistical and computational methods, which might usually work every day, just developing these kind of methods. I know, like, we usually don't really patent this method because, like, it's usually built upon other similar methods and not like innovative themselves. But like when I was at UNC, I was actually engaged in a project, and that was actually patented. Basically, it was that it's just a formula. You have like sequencing data of a patient, and you just plug in that formula, and you'll get a subtype of the patient tumor, and this can inform the clinician of a certain treatment. So I'm just wondering, like, what kind of like computational methods can usually be patented in general?
So you can't patent, you know, equations that are kind of already known, like E equals MC squared. You know, you can't patent those kind of equations. You can't really patent software either. That's more protected by copyright. Now we're getting into kind of the whole AI world and what can be patented under there. So what you're describing is kind of a formula that you would plug in a bunch of like characteristics or symptoms and stuff like that, and then this machine, this AI machine, would yield some sort of like. So, am I correct in kind of, you know, articulating that?
Yeah. I'm not sure what exactly they patented, because it's just handled by the lawyers at like UNC, yeah. Like the Cancer Research Institute. I'm not sure about the details. Yeah.
So that sounds kind of, that sounds like that they created some sort of a statistical formula that can help guide their diagnoses. So yeah, you can patent that. You can't, like I said, you can't patent like a normal mathematical formula, something that's already known in the world. But if you create a formula that can steer you to making better diagnoses, which is kind of behind all of those like online apps that, you know, you plug in the fact that you're sneezing, coughing, and it tells you you have COVID. Pretty much, I would say that's probably a very similar idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see.
Okay. Anyone has any question? I was going to otherwise ask Joanna to speak on certain molecules and where the interesting pattern of them. So PCSK9 for me was very interesting.
Yep.
And you've written about that in your book,
Yep.
right? You can speak about that, or maybe any other sort of rivalry that you find is interesting has been in the industry.
Well, first of all, why do you find that one to be so interesting?
Well, because I was working for Amgen, and I know for a fact that that there was only one amino acid difference in the CDR between the two molecules.
Okay.
Only one, and all kinds of discussions were happening at that time, whether the stolen or given away, and then with how can a huge 150 kilodalton molecule have only one amino acid different, right? Like bizarre. So that to me, that's why that was interesting. And anyway, personal thing. But if there's any other molecule you feel that there was a rivalry, that would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, so let's talk about Amgen's cholesterol drug, Repatha,
Yes.
or Repatha, however you pronounce it.
Right.
Repatha.
That's the one, yeah.
So when it comes to getting a patent, there are a few hurdles you have to overcome. One is that you have to satisfy patentable subject matter. So something that we've talked about, like AI, patenting AI technology. The big question is it patentable subject matter? Gene patents they may be patentable or they may not be patentable after the whole myriad discussion a couple years ago. So patentable subject matter is number one. Utility is number two. It has to have a purpose. Most things have a purpose. A phone, the purpose of a phone is to talk on the phone, or it could be a paperweight like mine is right now. It's just sitting on some paper. So it just has to have a purpose. Number three is novelty. You can't patent something that you just walk and stumble across. Okay, I find a branch outside, I can't patent the branch. But if I take that branch and I turn it into a sculpture or, a stick that can be used to perform surgery, I don't know, then you can patent that. Number four is obviousness, which is one of the biggest hurdles, obviousness. So you can't patent something that is already obvious. So if somebody came up with a blue car, you can't just change the color of the car and make it green and expect to get a patent on it. You have to do something else to it. You have to create a better car, like a Tesla or something like that. So obviousness is always a big hurdle. And then finally, written description. You have to describe your invention in your patent application. You can't just kind of throw together a piece of paper, generally talking about, oh yes, we create these vehicles that can move people from point A to point B. They can be a number of different colors. They can have, one or more steering wheels, something like that. You have to be very specific. You have to really describe your invention. And the purpose of that is to show that you actually invented something. And what did you invent? Historically, the US gives people more leeway with having broader claims. So in the US, you could still, if you come up with just a regular car, the car that was in the Flintstones, it was barely held together by wood and like some wheels. In the US, you could theoretically extrapolate a Tesla car from that original car because the US gave inventors a lot of leeway. In other countries, especially Europe, you were very limited to what you can claim. You could only claim pretty much that specific car that you put in your patents. So this case that we're talking about with Repatha, for instance, it's Amgen's antibody. Amgen described its antibody very nicely in its patent applications. It, the PCSK9 inhibitor helps with cholesterol, but it's an antibody. And with antibodies, traditionally, people had a lot of leeway. They could describe antibodies in the patent claims by binding to a specific antigen. So nothing more than saying, hey, this binds to CD19 or something like that. Or you could describe it by performing a certain function, such as like blocking binding to something. So in the case of Amgen's antibody, it blocked binding to this PCSK9. And that way it helped with the whole cholesterol situation. So Amgen had their cholesterol drug on the market, but then Sanofi and Regeneron came up with a slight modification to that antibody, and their drug is called Praluent. And all of these have always weird names that I can never pronounce. But so Amgen sued Sanofi and Regeneron for infringing its patent. As a counterclaim, Sanofi and Regeneron basically said that Amgen's patents were invalid because they didn't satisfy the written description requirement. So while the patent claims to Repatha talked about performing a certain function, which is inhibiting PCSK9, there's many modifications to those antibodies that can also inhibit the same protein, right? And so, and by showing that Sanofi and Regeneron said that their antibody also inhibits PCSK9. And the court ended up siding with Sanofi and Regeneron after numerous back and forths. And they basically kind of said that, yes, while Amgen's specific antibody also inhibits this, so do other variations of antibodies. And so this case was very important, and this case actually is still going through the courts. And I think just recently it got shut down actually by the Supreme Court that, Amgen's patent has been completely, or a lot of its claims have been completely invalidated. And they're basically, the thought in the industry after that case is specifically for antibody patents, you have to be specific about the CDR sequences and kind of being much more tailored to the actual structure of the antibody. You can't just go after what the function of that antibody is anymore. You have to be more tailored. So I personally think it's a very important case. And I think even when I was working in-house in an antibody company, we oftentimes drafted claims very broadly by function. We also had backup claims that talked about the specific sequences, but we focused a lot on like the broader language, like competitively inhibits something and specifically binds to something. And I don't think those kind of claims are gonna be good enough anymore. I think with antibodies specifically, we have to get more narrowed and focused on the sequences. You have to have a sequence listing and you have to call those sequences out. But I think we are also seeing this in other areas as well with different drugs and different kind of molecules. You have to be more, you can't just start claiming that your drug treats all cancers. You have to specifically say which kind of cancers can be treated.
Right. Which is, just a follow up on that, is that like the TNF alpha inhibitors, there are so many anti-TNF alpha inhibiting antibodies, right? Infliximab plus more, maybe at least 10 or 15 antibodies which are in the market, which are various, basically all of them bind to either TNF or TNF receptor. So all of them will have, they would have a molecule patent. Is that what they would all have? Because
they
they're
would
all
all have the composition patent. So even Humira is a TNF alpha inhibitor, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So that, so they all have their, they all have their composition patents. But like in the case of Humira, for instance, that composition patent's already, expired. It's the other patents that people are fighting over, and that's where they're getting more specific about the drug itself and naming whatever sequences are important to that drug.
Again, I'm keeping on asking this question on this PCSK9 because one of the things that intrigues me is that one is the antibody itself and the sequences of the antibody, and that you get the composition of matter patent for that company. But the pathway by which these antibodies block, the fact that they block PCSK9 and PCSK9 is involved in lipid cholesterol inhibition and all of that, that pathway also is patented. So, but you can only describe the pathway once, right? I mean, the second company will probably be infringing.
No, I don't think you can. I don't think they've patented the pathway because the pathway is something that occurs naturally, right?
Okay, so you can't. I see. Okay.
Right. You can't. They're gonna. If you try to patent the pathway, they're just gonna say it's a natural pathway that occurs. You just kind of discovered that pathway. So no, you can't patent the pathway. You can patent anything about that antibody. So its structure, talking about its CDR sequences, its light chain, heavy chain, anything structurally about it. Talk about what it binds to, like what antigen, and specifically what residues does it bind to. you know, you have to kind of get even more and more specific with those antibodies.
Right. Akshay, thinking?
No, I was just wondering, just a general question. I was just wondering which country internationally is it very hard to apply for patents at, or the most companies avoid applying to?
India.
India, right? I've heard about that.
Well, India has a rule against patenting any follow-ons to drugs. So in the US, again, the reason AbbVie has 120 plus patents on Humira is because they can. You can patent any sort of modification to that antibody, any sort of modification to its process, you can kind of patent it. In India, you're allowed one patent, and that's it on that composition. You can't do any more with that. The classic case in India from a couple of years ago was with Gleevec, the Novartis drug. And that drug, so Novartis, the original patent for that drug itself was never patented in India in the first place. It was patented in the US and a handful of other countries. But then Novartis discovered that it's actually the salt of that original that's more useful. And it's the salt that they ended up patenting everywhere in the world, including India. But in India, they said that, you know, it's a salt, so it's just a modification of the original. So, but even if it wasn't patented in India, the original wasn't, they still could not get the salt patented. And that was a whole big case that went on for several years and even made its way to like the Supreme Court of India. And even though Novartis showed that the salt was like 30% better and was, you know, more efficacious, that was not good enough to overcome that. Meanwhile, in the US, you can get patents for something that is, I don't know, 1% better. So, you know, in the US, you can kind of, you can stack your portfolio and get numerous patents on one idea as long as there's, you know, slight modifications. So India, I would say, is probably the hardest, you know, from that perspective. Europe is equally hard because Europe just is a stickler on what you have in your written application. And if you don't have it written word for word the way, you know, you want it, you won't be able to get it in Europe. So every country has its, you know, nuances. Those are kind of the ones I call out.
Yeah. Okay. If I don't see anyone unmuting, so ready for the 10 questions then, huh, Joanna?
Sure.
Nothing very difficult. Okay. Well, what book are you reading these days?
I am reading, can I look on my phone because I never remember the title of it?
Yeah, please, of course.
So I read my books on Audible because whenever I'm in the car, I get to listen to Audible. So right now I'm reading a book from Brian Tracy, which is a motivational speaker, the universal laws of success and achievement.
So related to that, what skills are you currently working on?
Like what skills am I trying to develop?
Is there something that you're working on yourself, like something that you're trying to do, which is...
I'm always trying to work on myself. Right now, I guess the skill I've been trying to work on is my Arabic language skills. So I've been trying to learn Arabic for the past year.
Arabic. Say something in Arabic. Not that I know, but...
Marhaban.
Okay. If you were to snap your fingers and become an expert at something, what would that be?
Oof. I guess travel. I love traveling. So I'd become an expert in traveling to every country in the world.
That travel is on your mind, isn't it? When you have a bad day, what do you do? Like, what's your go-to thing to do when you have a bad day to get out of it?
I go to the fridge and grab a drink, grab some wine.
Okay. Which historical figure would you like to meet?
Can the figure still be alive?
Sure.
Yeah, Roger Federer.
Oh, You play tennis.
Yes.
Yeah. I sort of alluded to that a little bit, but which IP sort of study or battle or the rivalry or whatever is interesting? One or two, which interesting ones that you like?
Well, the case of Amrin, have you heard of that company? Amrin, that had the fish oil derivative Acepta. It has been kind of a big case over the past year, and the Supreme Court just shut them down too. But this case is, they had this fish oil derivative, so it's nothing groundbreaking, but they had a drug that seems to be doing well with treating triglyceride levels. And they got a bunch of patents on it. And I've been a part of numerous consultations on this whole case. And I always said that I am siding with Amrin on this. I like their patents. I like what they have. And every single time the district court, the federal circuit, the Supreme Court just shut them down. So that's the most fascinating one because I'm constantly proven wrong.
Is that like omega-3 or something like that kind of stuff?
No, that's the EPA case. I can send it to you. I've written about it too, and I disagree with how the courts have treated that case. So
yeah, I know you've written a little bit about opening up the patents for the COVID vaccines and your position of it. Yeah, I'll send the link to folks to read. Two more questions. What would we be seeing you doing on the weekend?
On the weekend, usually I play tennis with my kids or drive them to their tennis-related activities.
Okay. And the last question, who would you want to have on your talk show?
Oh, on my talk show, probably Roger Federer.
Yeah, that's it. So any last parting words for folks who are here from your perspective, not just patent, just they are in that transition, trying to get from industry to from academia to industry.
Yeah, I think working in academia is different than working in industry. You don't, the thoughts of IP are kind of, secondary. And I think once you hit industry, IP is a very prominent thing that industry focuses on, and kind of what you develop for a company becomes that IP, and it becomes very, very important. So I think, just learning some basics about patents and what you need to start thinking about, and just familiarizing yourself with even like the terminology with patents, written description, obviousness, novelty, because those will help you think about your own inventions and how, like, what you're contributing to those inventions and what can actually be patentable. So just familiarizing yourself with the basics of IP and why it's important. And then it will also help you kind of follow the different cases, that are going on in the media, and you'll be able to see and start strategically thinking about what it actually means to issue a compulsory license for a drug, and kind of what are all those, secondary effects of that. And you'll be able to understand the different arguments from the different sides a little bit better.
Right. I've told them many times, all the students in this class and also in others, that your book that I really, really like, it's a really simple book to read, and the $1 billion patent, and I think it's a sort of biotechnologies must-read book, whether you buy it or from the library. It's a really nice book. So thank you for writing it. I know you put a lot of thought behind that. Amazing case studies. I love those. Anyway, thank you so much for.
I was just going to say, I wanted to create a book that was easy to digest for non-legal people. So that was my whole motivation behind writing that book.
Yeah. So, Joanna, thank you for coming. I'm going to ask you to leave, but I'm going to ask the rest of the folks to stay on for a few minutes because I want to just get a quick feedback from them. Thank you so much, Joanna.
All right. Thanks. Nice meeting you all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Thank you.
A network should last a lifetime. Let us help you create lasting professional relationships with our world-class mentors through the Biopatrika Industry Mentorship Program. A strategic guidance program unlike no other, full of expert interviews, industry internship opportunities, CV writing, inflection point analysis, life maps, and of course, the gateway to your dream career. For a limited time only, all our services are freely available for you, as we truly want you to succeed.